Hello and welcome back to my channel. We're doing a book review today, something I haven't actually done in a little while. Haven't been reading as much, but also sometimes I just don't feel like doing a video review of a book. But this one is living in my head rent-free and not in a good way, so we're gonna talk about this. I didn't really write down any notes, like I've got my Goodreads review here to like look back on to try to spark things, but yeah, this book was a big old disappointment. That book is called A Winter's Promise, and let's read the blurb because it sounds interesting. Long ago, following a cataclysm called the Rupture, the world was shattered into many floating celestial islands, known as arcs. Each has developed in distinct ways. Each seems to possess its own unique relationship to time, such that nowadays vastly different worlds exist, together but apart. And over all the arcs, the spirit of an omnipotent ancestor abides. So aside from the omnipotent ancestor part, like all of that sounds so cool and like barely comes up. It is the most tenuous of window dressing for this story. Ophelia lives on Anima, an arc where objects have souls. Beneath her worn scarf and thick glasses, a young girl hides the ability to read and communicate with the souls of objects, and the power to travel through mirrors. Her peaceful existence on the Arc of Anima is disrupted when she is promised in marriage to Thorn from the powerful dragon clan. Ophelia must leave her family and follow her fiancé to the floating capital on the distant Arc of Pole. Why has she been chosen? Why must she hide her true identity? Though she doesn't know yet, she is to become a pawn in a deadly plot. Okay, so that all sounds like super fucking intriguing, and in my opinion, this book dropped the ball harder on an interesting premise than I have seen a book drop a ball in a very long time. Now, this book was originally in French and thus it was translated, but my issues are not necessarily with the actual like word choices and stuff like that. It is with the story and the plot, and I don't think we could have lost too much of that from the French version. So yeah. It sounds so good. All of these floating worlds, these different places, people with cool and weird abilities. And when we start out, we have our main character of Ophelia. She is a member of a large family. It's all very Regency, by the way. So if you like those sort of Regency marriage ties, marriage for money, blah, 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 oh, they barely touched hands kinds of things, this might be your vibe, but stick with me because I love those sort of things and this book still let me down. So we started out with an interesting, if a bit drawn out, scene of her trying to research her new husband's culture. And it gives us little hints about her, it gives us little hints about him, and at least the stereotypes of the culture that she's going to be going into, because we are told that they have like a drastically different culture than the one on Anima, and their social rules are super different. Which would be better if we actually had a better idea of what the social rules were on Anima before she goes to the new place, so we can tell the difference. But we don't really get much. It's just very standard, like, Regency style situation. The way that women are treated, the way that the culture is, it's just straight out of any of those kinds of classic Jane Austen style books. Which is really a pity because we are assured at one point that this is a matriarchal society, but it is demonstrably not. So the main character is being married off, yes, and unfortunately then she started not like other girlsing as hard as she possibly could. She doesn't want to get married, she doesn't want to wear the pretty dresses, she hates having her hair done, she's just so different, you guys. She's just so different. And that made me start hating our main character right away. It doesn't matter really that she has cool powers like being able to step through mirrors, and when she touches something with her bare hands she can tell the history of an object, so like she'll get the memories of the person who last touched the object, which is again a really cool thing that would be nice if we actually utilize later. We'll get to that. She also has a sentient scarf that reminds me a lot of the cloak from Doctor Strange, and they don't do anything with that either. It's just around sometimes, being a scarf that's alive. So many cool ideas in this book, and like none of them are used. That's the thing that drives me the most crazy. This book will introduce such interesting world building, such interesting cultural ideas, and then just never use them. So the main character has to go to this like snowy floating island called Pole, where supposedly the cultures are really, really different and everybody's not gonna like her, and her new husband is like obnoxious. I was really excited there for a minute because I do love an arranged marriage story, and I wrote one if you're interested, where the couple doesn't necessarily get along right away, but eventually they fall in love with each other, except for, again, this book dropped the ball. Because if you're looking for a romance, there is nary any to be seen. The main character spends more time, by far, with her husband's catty, obnoxious aunt than she ever spends with him. There are probably 5 scenes of her and her husband in this entire book, and most of them are spent bickering with each other, and not even in a fun, flirty way. They just like, he is taciturn and silent and closed off to the max, and he never really gets a chance to get beyond that. At one point she reads an object of his and like understands some things about him, but that's not the same as like forming an actual bond with him. And supposedly he likes her, but we never see any demonstration of that except for like one time when the plot needed him to believe her about something. He's like, I believe you because I like you. And then the next time he needed to believe her, he went right back to not believing her again because he was doing it because the plot needed him to. The only plot that this book is actually interested in is the really weird and fairly impenetrable court intrigue that goes on through most of the story. Because what actually happens is she goes to this place, she gets saddled as entourage to her new husband's aunt, and then they go to what is essentially the Winter Palace sequence from Dragon Age Inquisition. It's like this author played that sequence and was like, I'm gonna turn this into an entire book. So it's all just catty, snotty people who all kind of want each other dead in these powerful families, and their interactions, but make it boring. Like, that still sounds interesting, right? But it's not in this book. It's not. It's obnoxious, and I hate it. There's not, like, a single likable character in sight. Okay, there's one. Because also, for some reason, our main character has to disguise herself as a man for a majority of this book and pretend to be a footman for the aunt so that our main character doesn't get recognized, because if she gets recognized, fuck shit, she's in danger for some reason from these people. It's so confusing. So she spends the majority of the book disguised as a man, which again, you'd think I would like, but every choice this book made tropes and ideas that I like terrible somehow. It was like a special skill that this author had of just taking like, here's this beautiful thing that you love, Julian, I'm gonna rip it to shreds and throw it in the bin. So she's now a man in a society that she supposedly knows nothing about. She's a girl who went from like having servants to being a servant, being a male servant in a society she doesn't understand. How's she gonna handle it? Fine. She handles it fine. She has the only likable characters in the form of 2 fellow servants who just like show up to help her and give her advice whenever she needs it. And honestly, I shipped her with, I think his name is Ash, one of the main 2 plot servants that come along to like be her buddies and guide her all the way. I could buy their relationship. Like, that was the only relationship that I could actually buy. Every other single character is absolutely unlikable in every way. I was really hoping for the aunt character, who is deeply unlikable. I was hoping that once you got to know her, that she would like change a little bit, and you would like, once the main character would get in her good graces, maybe she would find that this aunt character actually is like a quality human, but no. She's just a selfish bitch like everybody else. And the culture is weird. Like, I spent most of the book trying to figure out this weird culture, because it's supposed to be very different from what our main character's used to. And at first it seemed like she was always getting yelled at for being too quiet and too mousy. So I'm like, okay, in this culture they value candidness, they value speaking your mind and being strong. But anytime our main character tries to do that, they also punch her. So I think the culture of this new place is specifically to hate on the main character. Like, that's what it all feels like. It feels like everything is built in such a way that the main character will suffer because of it. Everybody will hate her, and she has barely any allies, and the ones that she does have are kind of maybe using her. And maybe that sounds enticing to some people, but that's not for me. I need characters that actually, like, I don't need them to be likable, but I need them to at least have some gray. These people were all absolute dicks, every last one of them. And then, most of the way through the book, an antagonist appears, and he's this weird child who can bend people to his will, and he starts just doing that, and I'm like, where the fuck did this guy come from? Okay, we have a villain now. And then, at the end, he was dealt with just as swiftly. It felt like this author had no idea what she wanted to write about, and so just threw everything into a big bowl, stirred it up, and called it a book. But at one point, I got really excited because the main character had just had her brain washed by this dumb child villain, but she noticed that the kid had left something behind, and I was like, yes, cool, we're actually going to use something that we set up earlier in the story where she can read objects. So she's going to pick it up, she's going to read the object, and she's going to realize that she was brainwashed. It's a skill that's unique to her, it's a moment that it can only happen to her. It would be so great. And then it doesn't happen. It was set up on a silver platter, and the author didn't do it. I was so mad. All of the elements of this book could turn into an amazing story, and it's like the author ignored them. She'd invent them and then never use them. I would just, flames.
Flames on the side of my face.
This book was a unique level of frustrating, a unique level of absolutely obnoxious to read, because every time it set up a cool idea, it would never use it. All this cool premise, all this cool magic, all this cool world building ideas, backdrops, barely sketched in backdrops to a bunch of catty bitches. I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate it. I gave it 2 stars for the ideas on display because there were so many cool ideas, but ultimately I give this 0 stars because, like, every time I think about it, I am filled with a deep loathing in my heart. Not for me. I know we read this for a book club I'm in, and some other people really liked it, and I'm very interested when we finally have our book club meeting to find out what redeemable things you could find in this book, because I thought it was hot garbage, and I will not be reading the sequel. Oh, and the ending. The ending. If you don't like abrupt endings, this is not the book for you. Like, the main character looks at herself in a reflective surface, decides that she has grown as a person, and the book just stops. I don't have words. All there is just screaming. But okay. The magic system in this book is so soft. The softest magic system. If you want a magic system with rules, run. Don't walk, run from this book. If you want cultures that seem to have rules or make any sense, if you want characters that make any sense, I would just set this one down slowly and walk away. So this is Julian checking in after the book club meeting, and one of the people, like, absolutely loved it. It was, like, their favorite. They immediately went and read the rest of the series. And they, believe it or not, the main character and her husband are endgame, even though they had absolutely no chemistry, in my opinion. But okay, it's the slowest of slow burns. If you like a slow burn that's basically a stop, then read this book. But they also said that this book is really more of a very long prologue, and you really have to read the other books to really get to the story. And I'm like, that does not fly with me. I'm sorry. I will not tolerate, in my reading, fantasy books where the first book in the series is all set up for the rest of the series. You have to make your first book have a story, a plot, characters, something. You have to have them have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And even if you lead on to the other stories, and you can even end in a cliffhanger, even though I don't love cliffhangers, but you have to have a story in your first book. I will not tolerate. This is the world's longest prologue. No, not for me. No, thank you. I think that's all I have to say about this, but woof, it was not for me. If you are looking for an arranged marriage story where the couple doesn't necessarily like each other at first, but then they grow to love each other, I selfishly recommend my own book, The Wolf and the Hawk. It also has a clash of cultures, but there's no magic in it, so you don't have to deal with that. And also, like, the clash of cultures actually kind of, like, makes at least a little bit of sense. And there's no catty aunt in it at all, ever. So, yay. Thanks so much for watching. Have you read this book, and what did you think about it? If you loved it, please explain to me why. I was looking at the 5-star reviews, and a lot of them were like, the world building is so cool. And I'm like, yeah, there are a shit ton of cool ideas here. It would be lovely if any of them were utilized, though, in the actual story. Like, I mean, it did get an extra point from me for cool ideas too, but like, you can't just throw in a bunch of cool ideas and call it a book. It's better if you use the cool ideas within the story, not just put them there for everyone to go, ooh, ah, that's neat. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget you can support me over on Patreon or Ko-fi, or if you want, you can leave me a tip right here on YouTube if you're feeling it. I will see all of you again next time with whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye!